Hi, Rich Tyson here. Hey, I wanted to take a few minutes this afternoon and just talk a little bit about the important role of CEOs in strategizing for their companies. Really, like most important things, there is both content to that strategic process and process itself. So, content and process. And I'd like to speak just briefly about each. Content certainly should include the vision of the organization, what we're really about, what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to become. Simon Sinek called that the why of the business. So that's a critical piece of content. We also need to know what the value proposition of the organization is. What are we going to do for a specific target market in an exceptional way? Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, talked about the importance of what he calls a hedgehog concept, which says, hey, we need to pick something we're going to do and be the very best in the world at. And we ought to have a passion for that. That kind of goes to our vision and our why. And we ought to be able to make money. There ought to be an economic engine as well. So that value proposition is essential. What we will do for customers and why they would pay money for it. Why would they spend their scarce dollars with us instead of somebody else? And so that value proposition is really a critical piece of strategic planning. This is content again. Also, it's important in regard to our economic engine that we know how we're going to make money, what is our pricing structure, why would somebody pay that money to us, how does that money come to us? Does it come on terms? Does it mean that we're going to extend credit? And if we do, what are the cash flow implications of that? If we're selling something so that we have inventory, what is the cost of the inventory that we're carrying? If we're a manufacturer, we've got raw goods that we have to uh, build a stock of in order to run through a process and create something. If we're a wholesaler, it's different. We're going to have finished goods already in our possession, but we're going to have to decide how much of those we need on hand to meet customer demand. And so, even as a retailer, it becomes very critical that we understand how we handle inventory. Inventory that doesn't sell, it becomes wasted dollars. In effect, if I walk into a warehouse and I find that they have huge stocks of product and ask the question, how well is this moving? If they show me a significant stock of things that are not moving, then I have big questions for them. To me, that looks like stacks of dollar bills that we have literally frozen in place within an organization. So strategic planning says, how do we accomplish this relative to inventory? As we look at cash flow issues and implications, it's important that we understand that we also are in the mode of paying our bills. And so how quickly do we intend to pay our bills? Ideally, we're not turning our customers into our bank. And so it becomes important that we understand how we handle not only accounts receivable and inventory, but how we handle payables. And these all have to be factored into pro formas or forecasts that will look not only at profitability, but at cash flow. We can be very profitable and literally go out of business for lack of cash. And so it becomes really important that we understand that and we have forecasted for it. We make critical assumptions relative to the economic engine of the business. All of these things are very important. Then if we need bank financing or investor financing, those pro formas ought to show us what the gap is and how much we need. And we have to make arrangements for being able to repay whatever we borrowed from the bank or other investors. So, and that includes equity investors. How do you intend to restore them or to pay them out dividends? And so all of this needs to be built into the plan, the strategic plan for your financial forecast. Now, beyond all of that, it's what is the operation that is going to create the customer outcomes? Generally, there is a value chain. It is the things that we do to create value. And so we need to plan for that. And those need to factor back into the financial plan. And so flow charts of what we're going to be doing, how we're going to do it, how we produce a product or add value to something that we're going to put out, even a service business. What is the process of creating the service? And so that value chain becomes very important. If we have to buy goods from a supplier, how do they fit in with our value chain? All of this is the operational flow of the business. That has to be planned. And then beyond that, everything depends on the people that we have on our team. And so what competencies do we need? Who do we recruit to be part of this operation? What do they need to know? Have we built a training program, or will we, on how they are going to adopt our operation and create the outcomes we want? Very important that we understand that and that we train to it. Too often small businesses train by osmosis. It's, hey, just watch me and you'll figure out what to do. That's a poor way to train. We need to understand very specifically, and often those of us who have founded companies, created them and so forth, we get really good at doing things almost to the point that we think it's easy in our minds. And we don't realize that there are specific little things that we do that make a real difference in delivering the value proposition. And so really, every CEO ought to take the time, or work with their people, more importantly, to define what that operation is, what every piece of that value chain is, and to make sure that we understand how we deliver the value proposition. In addition to competency, which all of that is about, we need to understand, how do we create a highly engaged culture, a place that people want to work, that when they come to be part of that value chain operation, that they look forward to being at work, that they're well treated, that they feel important to the organization, and that we reinforce their importance and help them to be successful. So part of that content that a CEO should create is developing in his or her mind what the culture should look like. How do we make this a great place to work, a place where people want to be? In addition to that, rather, we need to have a strong recruitment program. If we know what kind of people and competencies we need to have a recruitment program that will deliver those people to our organization, that will be attractive to them. This takes some specific planning again. We need to define the positions that are important in the company that fit into our operation. Some of those may not even be mainstream to the value proposition. They may be staff functions like HR, or our controllership, running the money, or dealing with the money issues in our company. There may be a variety of those that we need. We need to understand what desired outcomes are from each of those people in their various functions. We need to understand, to the best of our ability, what kind of actions will deliver the desired outcomes. And we need to understand what kind of sustaining actions we as leaders, CEOs, need to do in order to support and sustain those people in becoming very competent and delivering the outcomes we need. And so recruitment is critically important. All of that is content, and that is a quick summary of most of the content. But let's go now to process. What is the strategic process? Well, as a CEO works on all of those key content pieces, if you will, components, they need to understand that that's all part of the strategic planning process. So the first thing that a CEO does with all of that is they're planning. They're making assumptions. They're developing ideas on how we create great outcomes, and they're developing a plan. But a plan that is not enacted is like a ship sitting in the harbor. That plan needs to be enacted. Back many years ago, Peters and Waterman wrote the book In Search of Excellence, and they said you should have a bias for action. Well, yes, you should, based on your plan. You put the plan into action and you move forward. And so it's planning first, then acting on it. Now, you might think that's the end of the story, that that's the full process, but it is not. The next part of it is control. I served as a company controller at one point in my career. I always wondered, why do they call it control? And then in my experience at the Harvard Business School many years ago, they called the whole issue of accounting control. And I thought, why again? Is it that the money controls everything? No, the control is this. We are acting on our plan, and now we're going to measure the outcomes of our action. So we're going to see, did we earn the money we thought we would? Did we deliver the value proposition? We're comparing the actual to the plan. We're checking our assumptions. Did we say we would do one thing that would create another? Did it happen? If not, why? We have to ask those questions. And that goes to evaluating the action versus plan. So action versus plan will always create variances. They can be positive, we get better results than we thought we would, or they can be negative. Every once in a while, they'll even be right on. But we want to learn from our experience what actually creates outcomes. Andy Grove, great author of a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. He was the CEO of Intel. He said one of the great mistakes we make in doing forecasting is that we do a forecast and we put it on the shelf. And we don't pay any more attention to it for a year, and then we'll come back and go through the greasy grind of forecasting again. He said, no, that's a mistake. What we need to do is measure action versus plan every month at the very least. Nowadays, you could even do it on a more real-time basis and say, okay, were our assumptions correct? We thought by doing this, we would create this outcome. Let's check that and make sure. So this is the control function. We're controlling our organization by measuring our actions against our plans, checking our assumptions, making sure things are working either as we thought they would or not. Now, that goes to evaluation. We get these variances back, we evaluate, we say, was this assumption correct or not? And then we revise. We adjust our plans based on what actually has happened in reality. Over time, we will revise our plans, we'll revise our actions. We'll continue, if we're smart, to get better and better at developing and growing our strategic plan to get the outcomes we're after. Ultimately, then, we can do something very special, which is reward ourselves. We can pay the dividends. We can pay off the loans. We can increase the cash that's in the bank. We can stabilize our organizations. All of this is the job of a CEO, both the content and the process. Is it easy? No, it is not. This is challenging. But I'm here to tell you that if you understand that your job as a CEO is to develop that content with your people. Very collaborative is so important. Work with your people to develop that plan, act on it, and then follow that process. Plan, act, control, evaluate, revise. Thank you for your time. This is a very short video on a very complex subject, but it's part and parcel to my life. I love doing this, and I hope that there have been some things in here that may be helpful to you. And I look forward to seeing you again on my next video. Thanks so much. Bye now.